Yo, what is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. I hope you guys had a good week 7 of fantasy football. Today, we're going to be starting off our week 8 rankings with the top 30 running backs. Pretty interesting week coming up. We have nobody on bye this week, and we had like 6 people on bye last week. Don't really know why they're doing that, but that's the case. And honestly, not too many injuries to note on. Seems like CMC will be fine. He played this past week, so nothing to worry about there. Bijan Robinson, I mean, he had a very strange week where he had a headache and basically didn't play, but it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, so he should be good to go this week. There's also a good chance that Roschon Johnson will be coming back this week, so that definitely going to affect D'Onta Foreman. We obviously don't know how much. I still think D'Onta Foreman will be solid, so we'll have him ranked here, but we're not going to have Roschon ranked. Obviously, Kyren is on IR. Sounds like Jerome Ford hurt his ankle, so Kareem Hunt will be the main running back ranked there. And I'm not really sure exactly what's going on with Miles Sanders right now. He was hurt. They just had a bye week, so we don't exactly know. I have Chuba ranked here because that's just assuming that Miles isn't going to play. And even if he does play, Chuba still might be the better option right now. So I think that's just a situation we're going to have to monitor this week as it goes on. But besides that, not really a ton else. So let's get into these rankings. All right, so first up is going to be Christian McCaffrey. Not a ton of surprise here. He honestly had a bad week last week, and he's had 2 touchdowns. So if that's the bad week we're going to get from him, then sign me up for that all day. And now this week, they're going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a lot worse rush defense than the Vikings do. So I'm not really too worried about him at all. I know that they struggled last week. Trent Williams hopefully will be back, but regardless, CMC is going to be a stud no matter what. After him, we're going to have Eckler here. I know he did not have a very good week this past week coming back from injury, but they did have a hard matchup. He still is coming back from injury, and overall, the offense just didn't look very good. Now they're going up against the Chicago Bears, who have given up the 7th most points to running backs on the year, so I think this should be a spot where Eckler can bounce back, and if not this week, then I think we're going to have some major red flags. Then after him, we're going to have Travis Etienne here. I mean, he scored 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games. Obviously, we're not going to project that every single week, but he's clearly shown that he has that ability. And now this week they're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have given up the 10th most points to running backs on the year. So it should be another spot for Etienne to just continue his dominance. And to start off my tier 2, my running back 4, I'm going to have Isaiah Pacheco here. He's been just dominating the past month. And now this week they get the Denver Broncos, who are giving up the most points to running backs on the year for fantasy. So this should be a spot where he just completely smashes. His snaps have gone up, his production has gone up, everything about him has just been amazing for fantasy, and with one of the best, probably the best matchup for fantasy running backs, should be an absolute great spot for Pacheco. And then after him, I'm going to have Alvin Kamara here, who has just been getting some of the most unreal target volume I've seen from a running back in a long time. I mean, he's done it before, but he's gotten 13 receptions and 12 receptions in 2 of the 3 games that he's played. And they're also playing the Colts this week, who have given up the 6th most points to running backs on the year. So everything just lines up for Kamara to just continue what he's been doing. And I'm not really going to adjust my expectations until I see something differently. After him, we're going to have Tony Pollard. They're going up against the LA Rams, so it's actually a pretty tough matchup for running backs. Still, Pollard is getting basically all the work in this backfield. Pretty good offense. We saw the past week they were on a bye. I mean, they were on a bye last week, but 2 weeks before that, we saw that like 60-yard reception he had. He can break a massive play anytime, and he's getting the volume. So there's a lot of times where he would be ranked a little bit higher than this. Just a tough matchup, and the guys ahead of him have really good matchups, but still going to be a great play. And then after Pollard, we will have Jahmyr Gibbs here. He really had his breakout performance this past week. Looked really good, really explosive, was used in the rushing and receiving game, which was great to see. And this is obviously assuming that David Montgomery won't be here this next week. I'm assuming he's not going to be. I guess there is a possibility of that, but they have a bye next week, so I'd be very, very surprised if David Montgomery plays. Gibbs having the backfield to himself again, and they're playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have given up the 5th most points to running backs on the year, just lines up for another smash spot for Gibbs to play. And then the last guy I'll have in this tier is going to be DeAndre Swift. They have a little bit tougher matchup going up against the Washington Commanders, but still more of a middle of the road than a really tough matchup. And with this offensive line, they just look so good. I mean, it's like kind of a perfect situation for Swift because he is just so explosive. And with this line, he's able to create so much. Then moving on to my tier 3 of running backs, I'm going to start off with the guy from getting off the bye week. It's going to be Breece Hall here. He's still been working back from his ACL injury last year, and then the week before his bye week was the first time where he really got all of the work, and he absolutely dominated. Now they've had their bye week, so just more time for him to get healthy, and they're going up against the New York Giants, who are giving up the 8th most points to running backs. So I think this is a spot where Breece Hall can just continue to break out, and I'm just hoping that this coaching staff doesn't do anything dumb and try to give Dalvin Cook the ball a bunch again. Then after him, we will have Kenneth Walker here, who had a little bit worst week last week has been amazing for fantasy, but this week they're going up against the Cleveland Browns, who have been a really good defense against running back. I mean, just against everybody in general. So I do have a little bit of worries there. Obviously still a really good option, but have lowered my expectations just a little bit. And especially because he doesn't catch passes, that does hurt him and his floor a decent amount, but he's just so talented and has been getting so much work. And especially if Zach Charbonnet is out again, then he'll probably move up some, but I'm expecting Charbonnet to be back this week. Then after Walker, I'm going to have Saquon Barkley here. Obviously on the other side of Breece Hall, and while the Jets defense has been really good, they had given up the least amount of points to wide receivers on the year. They've actually been pretty friendly against running backs, giving up the 11th most points to running backs. And we saw Barkley coming back from his injury this past week, honestly struggled for most of it until the very end of the game, where he started just balling out again, catching passes, breaking tackles, just looked like his old self again. So I think another week removed, and hopefully, I mean, what seems like a defense he can take advantage of, it should be another good week for him. And we're also not totally sure if Daniel Jones will be back. I don't really think that affects him too much. I mean, honestly, that the offense looked better with Tyrod Taylor, but obviously the contract they gave Daniel Jones, they'll put him back in when he's back. I think it's kind of a net neutral, honestly, but regardless, I think Barkley should be a solid spot. After Barkley, we're going to have Raheem Mostert here. He struggled last week, but they were playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the best rush defense in the NFL, so I'm not too worried about it. They honestly just couldn't really run the ball at all, so kind of just throw it away game for him. And then this week, they're getting the New England Patriots, who have been middle of the road, but easier side matchup for running back. So this should be a spot, honestly, where I think the Dolphins were going to want to bounce back from last week, and Mostert should be really involved in that. And then the last guy in this tier I'm going to have is going to be Bijan Robinson. Obviously, he was a massive storyline this past weekend. He didn't play. He played 6 snaps, didn't get any touches. It sounded like he had a headache or just wasn't feeling well, so he couldn't play, but nobody really got a notification about it until halftime. So really screwed a lot of people over for fantasy, but it sounds like they're not really too worried about it. Doesn't seem like it should be anything that lingers. So I'm assuming that he's playing, but I don't know. I have put him down just a little bit because of that. Also, he hadn't been performing quite at the level that we had hoped for the past couple of weeks. And also this week, they're playing the Tennessee Titans, who are one of the better run defenses in the NFL. So all that just kind of leads up to Bijan being a little bit lower in my rankings this week, but still somebody who's going to be in your lineup. Now, on to the next tier, guys. I'm going to start it off with James Cook, who had a really good week last week, despite the Bills looking terrible. And they were utilizing him in the rushing and receiving game. So hopefully they just continue that going forward. I don't know why they gave him 4 or 5 touches a couple weeks ago. That was really weird. But he's obviously the best running back in this backfield. However, they are playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week, which have been really good against running backs. So a little bit of worry there, but if they just keep using him the way they have been in both the rushing and receiving game, he should be just fine, especially with this offense wanting to bounce back because they've struggled the past couple of weeks. And then after Cook, we're going to have Jonathan Taylor here, who has only been getting ramped up more and more the past couple of weeks. Had some nice work this past week, definitely looked the best so far. And so I think that only continues, and they're just going to keep utilizing him more and more. And he's so talented that he can kind of overcome everything, but he does have a really, really hard matchup this week against the New Orleans Saints, who have given up the 29th least points to running back, so they're the 4th best rush defense in the NFL. So I do have some reservations there, but I think you're going to have Jonathan Taylor in your lineup every single week at this point. Then after him, I'm going to have Joe Mixon, who they're going up against the San Francisco 49ers, who obviously have had a really good defense, but they struggled the past 2 weeks. Well, honestly, it's their secondary that has been struggling more. Joe Mixon has been getting a lot of volume, but he just has not been producing the way that we want to. Hopefully this Bengals offense just really takes that step forward that they need to from this bye week that they just had. But he's honestly mostly a volume player right now, especially the same as his next guy, who we're going to have Josh Jacobs here. Really unfortunate because he had a great matchup this past week, but could not take advantage of it at all. I mean, definitely Brian Hoyer was a massive issue with that. I'm really hoping that Jimmy Garoppolo will be back this week because that is so much better for this whole entire offense. Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, everybody in this offense. But they are playing the Detroit Lions, who have given up the 30th least points to running backs on the year, so they're the 3rd best rush defense on the year. But as long as Jacobs is utilizing the receiving game, he can basically overcome that, and for the most part, he has been. But definitely his rushing upside, it just has not been there this year. So similar to Mixon, kind of just a volume play, but Mixon definitely has a better matchup, so I have him ahead right now. And another bad matchup for a guy I'm going to have next is going to be Derrick Henry. He honestly hasn't been getting the volume that we're used to and hasn't been getting the same volume as either of these guys. He has some games, he hasn't some games. Doesn't really seem to be a ton of rhyme or reason to it, but that's kind of what's been going on, so we've just had to adjust. And they're also playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have actually been the second best rush defense in the entire NFL this year, so really hard matchup for him, and he's already been struggling. I am a bit worried about it, but it's Derrick Henry, so you can't really bench him, especially we've still seen it this year, but I definitely am worried about it a bit. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Aaron Jones. Really unfortunate they just haven't utilized him the same way. He might just not be totally healthy right now, so I have lowered him a bit, but they really need him for this offense, so I'm pretty sure they're going to make some type of change. I've seen them do this before plenty of times with Aaron Jones, where they don't utilize him, they talk about utilizing him more, and then they do, so I'm kind of expecting that to happen. If we go a couple more weeks like this, then it's going to be major red flags, but they honestly just really need him for this offense right now. Then moving on to tier 5, I'm going to have D'Onta Foreman here. He went crazy last week, scored 3 touchdowns in absence of Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert. Kind of what I talked about at the beginning of this video. It sounds like Roschon Johnson should be back. I honestly thought he was going to be back last week, but he wasn't. But I think with how good Foreman was, they're just going to have to keep utilizing him while Khalil Herbert's out, and maybe even while he is there. But there's definitely a possibility where Foreman just takes that Herbert role and just is used on first and second down, and then Roschon is used on third down. I don't know exactly, but I really doubt that they're going to go away from Foreman too much after that performance. And they're also playing the Los Angeles Chargers this week, who have given up the 13th most points to running backs on the year. So another favorable matchup. I definitely want him in my lineup if I got him. And if for some reason Foreman misses again, then he's going to go way up these rankings. And after him, we're going to have Alexander Madison here. Definitely a situation I want to watch with him because Cam Akers looked pretty good against the Niners. He outproduced him. It still seems like Madison's the lead back there, but it seems to be closing on more of a 50-50 gap. This week, they have a very favorable rush defense in Green Bay, who are giving up the 3rd most points to running backs on the year. So I think we'll get a much better idea of what they actually want to do, especially with Akers looking as good as he did. I still think Madison is the lead back here, but it's definitely a situation that I want to monitor. But as long as he keeps getting the volume that he is, then going to be a solid play. And this week, just such a good matchup. He might not even need a ton of touches to be good. Then after Madison, I'm going to have Rashad White here. I've talked about him, obviously, a lot of different weeks, and pretty much I've been right about him a lot. It's been very, very matchup dependent for him, where he'll do really good against good matchups and really bad against bad matchups. This week, they're going up against the Buffalo Bills, who might seem like a bad matchup, but they're actually giving up the 12th most points to running backs on the year. So it's actually going to be a good spot for him. So I'm pretty excited to start him. Obviously, he is another kind of just volume play, but this is one of the weeks where I think that he'll be solid. Actually, you know what? I'm going to move him ahead of Madison. And after them, I'm going to have Gus Edwards. It definitely seems like he is the clear lead back in this offense right now, and they're even utilizing him more in the receiving game than they have been in previous years and in other times when guys have been hurt. And he had like an 80-yard broken play reception this past week, which was pretty cool to see. Obviously, that's not like indicative of what's going to continue to happen, but definitely nice to know that that's a possibility. And they're also playing the Arizona Cardinals this week, who have given up the 4th most points to running backs on the year. So another spot where Gus Edwards should have a great week. And then after Gus Edwards, we will have Ramondre Stevenson here, who's also going to have a good matchup this week going up against the Miami Dolphins. He's also been utilized a lot more in the receiving game recently, so that's been really nice for fantasy. It does seem like Zeke is definitely going to be a consistent factor here. So obviously Stevenson has fallen down the rankings a lot, but he's still definitely like a low-end RB2 at this point. And then the last guy in this tier I'm going to have is going to be Javonte Williams. He was definitely the lead back in this offense. We definitely thought that might be more of a 50-50 split with McLaughlin, but we saw that is definitely not the case, and Javonte looks really good this past week, so he's a clear lead back here, and I'm just going to assume that going forward. However, this week they do have a really tough matchup in the Kansas City Chiefs, who have given up the 5th least amount of points to running backs on the year, so this is a tough matchup. So I have him in this like high-end RB3 range, but still a decent play. And then to start off the last tier, I'm going to have Dameon Pierce here. And this is also a situation that I definitely want to watch. They have a really, really good matchup this week in Carolina, who are giving up the 2nd most points to running backs on the year. So an absolutely great matchup for running backs. But before the bye week for them, which was last week, Devin Singletary kind of operated as a lead back here, with Dameon Pierce almost being the backup. I don't know if that was just kind of a hot hand thing or what exactly was going on there. I'm assuming that it more was, and that Pierce is still the lead back there, but it's definitely something that I want to watch. And obviously Pierce would be a lot higher if I knew he was getting all the work, but I just can't say that for sure right now. And then after Pierce, we are going to have Derrick Henderson Jr., who came out as the lead back. I mean, a lot of us thought it was going to be Zach Evans. I kind of just stayed away from everything. I had Zach Evans ranked the highest, but Derrick Henderson Jr. was the obvious clear lead back here. And so until Kyren comes back, I'm just going to assume that going forward. Royce Freeman did get a good amount of work, but Zach Evans, I think, only got 1 snap, so he's basically out of the picture. I think Derrick Henderson will be the best for sure for fantasy, but they're playing the Dallas Cowboys this week, so a really hard matchup, but still going to be a definite flex play just based off the volume and how good the running back position has been for the Rams. And then after him, I'm going to have Kareem Hunt here. Another guy I kind of talked about at the top of this video. Jerome Ford looks like he's going to miss some time, and Kareem Hunt looks really good in taking over for him. So I think that's just going to be the case going forward. And so until Jerome Ford comes back, Kareem Hunt should be solid. Pierre Strong probably will get some work, but I think Kareem Hunt's going to be the main back here. And then after him, my running back 29, I'm going to have Brian Robinson Jr. there. He did not get a ton of touches this past week, but he did get a touchdown, so that kind of saved his day, but overall was not very good. And this week they're going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the best run defense in the NFL, so I'm pretty scared of him, but obviously you're going to have to play him in some scenarios, but definitely not somebody that I'm excited about. And the last guy in this top 30 that I have is going to be Chuba Hubbard, another guy that I kind of talked about at the top of this video. I don't really know if Miles Sanders is going to play. I don't think he's going to. And even if he does, there's a decent chance that Chuba's the better play. He's been performing way better, and they're also playing the Houston Texans this week, which is a great matchup for running back. They're giving up the 9th most points to running backs on the year, so definitely whoever that running back is, I want to take advantage of it. I think it's going to be Chuba, but I guess we'll probably want to listen to the coaching staff and see what they say this week. There's also some guys obviously right outside this area who are definitely in consideration. Najee Harris looked really good this past week. Zach Moss is still getting a lot of work. Jalen Warren scored a touchdown. I think those are kind of the main guys. Antonio Gibson, kind of interesting because they also have a tough matchup like I just mentioned with Philadelphia. They might have to be passing the ball more. Those are kind of the main guys right outside of there. If there's anyone else I didn't mention, just let me know down below in the comments. Ask me a start-sit question. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. My wide receiver video will be coming out after this, so just make sure you guys stay tuned for that. Drop a like on this video. It really helps me out a ton. And subscribe if you want more of this type of content. And I'll catch you in the next one. Later.